The SA-6 radar acquisition tone activates in 3 cockpits simultaneously at 1:47 a.m. over the northern Negev. Not a launch warning. An acquisition tone. The radar warning receiver's notification that a surface-to-air missile system has established a tracking lock on the aircraft, building the engagement geometry before a launch decision is made. The acquisition geometry exists. The missile has not yet left the ground. The 3 FA-18 pilots executing the inbound leg of their strike profile break in unison, dispensing countermeasures, and the acquisition tone drops within 4 seconds as they exit the engagement geometry. No missile fired. The battery did not commit. The break costs them their attack formation and their time on target window. They recover to their abort altitude and proceed to their bingo fuel point. 3 aircraft, 3 combatants, 3 training cycles and deployment cycles and combat experience packages applied in 4.2 seconds to produce the correct response to a threat that did not, this time, follow through. The pilots log the acquisition event in their debrief and do not speculate about why the battery had them before they expected to be in its coverage zone. They log what happened. Analysis is for someone else. This is the 3rd consecutive night that a strike package using the northern approach corridor from Israeli airspace into Iran's Khuzestan province has encountered pre-positioned air defense activity at the point where the corridor crosses the Iraq-Iran border. 3 nights, 3 separate approach routes within the same corridor geometry, each slightly different in altitude, timing, and ingress azimuth, each adjusted from the previous night specifically because the previous night's route had generated threat activity. Each adjusted route has generated threat activity at exactly the point where the aircraft transition from Iraqi airspace into Iranian coverage, as if the air defense system knew not just the corridor, but the specific route within it. The air defense system knew the specific route within it. The deduction reaches the CAOC's intelligence watch cell at 3:10 a.m. in the form of a pattern analysis submitted by the Air Wing's electronic warfare officer, who has been compiling the threat activity logs from the 3 nights and who frames his finding in deliberately cautious language. 3 independent route variations, all generating threat response at the corridor entry point, suggesting possible advance warning of route parameters. The electronic warfare officer does not use the word compromise. He does not need to. The pattern analysis speaks clearly to anyone reading it at 3:10 a.m. The threat knows where the aircraft are going before the aircraft get there, and the threat has demonstrated this 3 times across 3 deliberately varied approaches in 3 consecutive nights. The Intelligence Watch Cell Duty Officer calls the CAOC's Counterintelligence Officer at 3:18 a.m. The Counterintelligence Officer reads the pattern analysis and makes 3 phone calls before 4 a.m. The first is to the 5th Fleet's Intelligence Directorate. The second is to the CAOC's Operations Security Officer. The third is to the CIA's station in Tel Aviv. The approach corridors used for strike packages routing from Israeli airspace into Iran are the product of a bilateral planning process conducted between U.S. strike planning staff and Israeli Air Force counterparts through the Joint Strike Coordination Cell established at the U.S. Embassy compound in Tel Aviv when Epic Fury's operational planning entered its final phase. The JSCC's function is to deconflict U.S. and Israeli strike packages, ensuring that aircraft from both countries' air operations do not occupy the same airspace at the same time, that Israeli air defense does not engage U.S. aircraft as unknowns, and that the approach corridors, timing windows, and altitude bands used by both sides' deep strike packages are coordinated to avoid conflicts and maintain the mutual tactical advantage of coordinated suppression effects. The JSCC operates on a classified communications architecture that connects the U.S. Troll Embassy Coordination Staff to the CAOC at Al Udeid and to the Israeli Air Force's Strike Planning Cell at Nevatim Air Base. The nightly approach corridor parameters, the specific routing, altitude, timing, and geographic waypoints for each strike package using Israeli routed approach geometry are transmitted through the JSCC's encrypted communications architecture at a planning interval of 6 to 8 hours before launch. The transmission goes to the CAOC's strike planning cell and to the Israeli Air Force's coordination staff simultaneously. On the 3 nights in question, the approach corridor parameters were transmitted at 6 p.m., 5:45 p.m., and 6:15 p.m., respectively, approximately 7 hours before the aircraft crossed the border. 7 hours between the transmission of specific route parameters and the moment those parameters determined where F/A-18S would be at 1:47 a.m. over the Iraq-Iran border. 7 hours is enough time to alert an air defense battery. The question is where in the 7-hour chain between transmission and execution, the route parameters were observed by a party who wasn't supposed to observe them. The JSCC is staffed by a small team of U.S. intelligence and operations officers on a 90-day temporary duty rotation, supported by 2 contractor employees who manage the secure communications infrastructure that the cell uses for its coordination traffic. The cell occupies a secured suite in the U.S. Embassy compound in Tel Aviv. Its communications systems are classified and encrypted. Its physical access is controlled by embassy security under the State Department's security protocol for sensitive compartmented information facilities. It has been operational for 23 days. The counterintelligence investigation of the JSCC's staff and communications architecture begins at a distance. No physical searches, no interviews, nothing that would alert a placed asset that the investigation has identified the cell as the probable compromise point. The investigation's first tool is the communications log. Every transmission through the JSCC's encrypted channel is logged with timestamp, sender account, recipient addresses, and message size. The log is pulled at 4:30 a.m. on March 19th, the morning after the 3rd threat activation, and examined for anomalies in the transmission pattern around the 3 compromised nights. The transmission log for all 3 nights shows a pattern that is clean for the primary coordination transmissions, the official channel messages carrying approach corridor parameters to the CAOC and the Israeli Air Force. The anomaly is in the administrative traffic. Low-priority system maintenance messages that transit through the cell's communications infrastructure as part of the automated health monitoring function for the secure communications hardware. These messages are not mission content. They are system status packets, CPU load, memory utilization, network latency, communications hardware diagnostics. They are invisible to anyone reading the mission content of the cell's communications traffic, because they are not mission content. They are infrastructure traffic. They are always there. Everyone ignores them. On the 3 nights in question, the health monitoring system sent maintenance packets at unusual intervals, bursts of activity at 6:04 a.m., 5:49 a.m., and 6:21 a.m. respectively, within 4 minutes of each night's approach corridor transmission. The bursts are slightly higher volume than baseline health monitoring traffic. Not dramatically higher, not enough to flag an automated anomaly detector, but measurably higher when compared against the preceding 20 days of health monitoring baselines. The excess volume in each burst is consistent with an additional small data payload embedded in the health monitoring packet stream. A steganographic insertion, data hidden inside legitimate traffic by a process that uses the health monitoring packet's variable length diagnostic fields to carry encoded content. The steganographic analysis, conducted by an NSA technical collection specialist brought in by secure video from the Fort Meade facility at 7 a.m., confirms the insertion at 9:15 a.m. The analysis is not simple. Identifying that health monitoring packet diagnostic fields contain encoded data requires first establishing a precise baseline of what the diagnostic fields should contain under normal operation. A baseline derived from the preceding 20 days of captured health monitoring traffic. and then demonstrating that specific packets deviate from that baseline in a statistically non-random way, consistent with additional information content. The deviation is small. The information theory math that demonstrates its non-randomness requires 3 hours of computation against the baseline dataset. The NSA specialist presents the results at 9:15 a.m. with the specific precision that characterizes findings whose implications exceed their computational complexity. The 3 health monitoring bursts following the 3 approach corridor transmissions contain non-baseline content in their diagnostic variable length fields, and the non-baseline content in all 3 cases encodes geographic coordinate strings corresponding to the approach parameters transmitted in the preceding 4 minutes. The encoding uses a key-based XOR cipher. The cipher key is short enough that it can be brute-forced against the limited key space defined by the known structure of health monitoring diagnostic packets. The fields have fixed formats with known valid value ranges, which constrains the set of keys that could produce syntactically valid diagnostic content when XOR'd against the embedded data. The NSA team breaks the cipher in 4 hours. The decoded content confirms the finding beyond any analytic ambiguity. 3 approach corridor parameter sets, encoded and hidden in health monitoring traffic, transmitted from the JSCC's communications infrastructure to wherever that traffic went after leaving the embassy compound. Where that traffic went is the network infrastructure question that the investigation's second phase will take 3 weeks to answer with confidence. Tracing the health monitoring traffic's downstream routing through commercial telecommunications infrastructure to a relay node assessed as IRGC associated. The relay node is outside U.S. legal jurisdiction. It is inside the assessment framework that already contains 9 previous IRGC communication nodes from this campaign's counterintelligence record. The health monitoring system's maintenance packets are generated by software running on the communications infrastructure hardware in the JSCC's equipment room. The software that generates them was modified. The modification implements the steganographic insertion function, detecting when an official channel transmission containing geographic coordinate data occurs, extracting the coordinate values, encoding them, and embedding them in the next scheduled health monitoring burst. The modification was made to the health monitoring software on the communications hardware. The communications hardware was serviced on March 3rd, 16 days before the pattern analysis reached the CAOC, by one of the 2 contractor employees responsible for the JSCC's secure communications infrastructure. The contractor is a communications security specialist who has been on embassy compound contractor roles for 11 months, supporting various classified communications systems across the embassy's SCIF infrastructure. His current assignment to the JSCC came when the cell was stood up 23 days ago. He has legitimate access to the communications hardware maintenance protocols. His background investigation, conducted by the State Department's Diplomatic Security Division, is current and returned no adverse findings. His financial records, examined under emergency access authorization at 10 a.m., show payment activity that traces through a cryptocurrency wallet to a Bahraini exchange to a cash account. 11 payments over 8 months. Total $79,000. His first payment was received 2 months before the JSCC was established, before the cell's formation was confirmed in any non-classified planning document. His handlers knew the cell was going to exist before most of the people who would staff it knew it was going to exist. The intelligence about Epic Fury's planning timeline that his handlers possessed to make that recruitment possible is itself a counterintelligence finding that the investigation will spend 2 additional weeks attempting to source. He is in his embassy compound accommodation at 11:30 a.m. when the counterintelligence team, 2 NCIS agents coordinating through the embassy's regional security officer, knocks on his door. He is calm. He was awake. His personal device, which he offers without being asked as the agents enter, has been factory reset within the last 45 minutes. The reset timestamp recoverable from the device's carrier activity log, is 10:52 a.m., 38 minutes after the emergency financial access authorization was transmitted to the investigation team, and 58 minutes before his door was knocked on. He did not receive a direct alert that the investigation had reached him. What he received at 10:50 a.m. was an automated embassy security notification that an emergency access authorization request had been processed against personnel records associated with JSCC contractor staff. A routine administrative notification that the embassy's personnel security system sends to contractors when their records are accessed under emergency provisions. The system was not designed to withhold notifications during active counterintelligence investigations. It was designed to notify personnel of access to their records. It did exactly what it was designed to do. The 38-minute window between the notification and the reset gave him enough time to clear the device. It did not give him enough time to leave the compound, arrange transportation, or move through embassy security without generating a departure record that the counterintelligence team had already flagged for monitoring. He knew the window was closing. He used it for the highest priority action available, clearing the device. He was wrong about which evidence would matter more. The device's forensic recovery, conducted by the same NSA specialist who performed the steganographic analysis, recovers 11 partially reconstructed message fragments from the device's flash memory, over 19 hours of analysis. The fragments are consistent with the operational check-in pattern seen in previous Epic Fury counterintelligence cases. Brief communications to an IRGC-assessed cutout device at intervals corresponding to significant JSCC activity windows. The most recent partially reconstructible fragment, time-stamped March 18th at 7:03 a.m., contains a partial text string that the analyst reads as "Confirmed 3 activations, will continue." It was sent 17 hours before the 11:30 a.m. door knock, 17 hours after the third night's approach corridor was compromised, and the SA-6 acquisition tone activated in 3 cockpits over the northern Negev. He had confirmed the operation's success and signaled its continuation. The investigation closed on him before the continuation could be executed. The financial forensics reveal that his first payment was received 2 months before the JSCC was established, before the cell's formation was confirmed in any non-classified planning document. His handlers knew the cell was going to exist before most of the people who would staff it knew it was going to exist. The intelligence about Epic Fury's planning timeline that his handlers possessed to make that recruitment possible is itself a counterintelligence finding that the investigation will spend 2 additional weeks attempting to source. What that source investigation finds is documented in a classified annex. The annex's circulation list has 7 names on it. The operational remediation begins before the arrest. At 10:15 a.m., 75 minutes before the counterintelligence team knocks on the contractor's door, the JSCC's approach corridor coordination function is suspended pending a communications architecture review. The suspension means that wave packages routing through Israeli airspace will not receive coordinated approach corridor parameters through the JSCC channel for a minimum of 72 hours. The operational impact is managed by shifting the affected strike packages to Arabian Sea approach geometries for that 72-hour period. A logistics adjustment that requires additional tanker support and extends the deep strike element's flight profiles, but does not require disclosing the compromise to anyone outside the need-to-know circle. The JSCC's communications infrastructure is audited and rebuilt over the 72-hour window. The health monitoring software is re-imaged from a clean baseline on all infrastructure hardware. The administrative traffic anomaly detection parameters are updated to flag any health monitoring burst volume deviation exceeding 8% above the established baseline. The personnel security notification system is modified to exclude active counterintelligence investigation access events from the automated contractor notification protocol. a change that the embassy's General Counsel approves under the existing authority framework in 31 minutes. The modification means that the 38-minute factory reset window will not exist for the next contractor whose records are accessed during an active investigation. The classified after-action documentation records the following: 3 consecutive nights of pre-positioned air defense activity at the exact corridor entry point for approach routes transmitted through the JSCC's official channel. The approach variations designed to make each night's route harder to predict made no difference because the variation parameters were themselves transmitted to the IRGC within 4 minutes of their generation. 23 days, the JSCC operated before the compromise's effects became visible in the threat activation pattern. 11 months the contractor was in place before activation for the JSCC assignment. $79,000 across 11 payments over 8 months. 11 partially reconstructed message fragments. 1 factory reset at 10:52 a.m., 38 minutes after an automated personnel notification that the contractor should not have received during an active investigation, and should not have received because the notification system's designers did not anticipate that personnel notifications and counterintelligence investigations would overlap in the same security architecture. The overlap produced a 38-minute window. The 38-minute window produced a cleared device. It did not produce an escape because the investigation's primary evidence, the steganographic analysis, the communications logs, the financial forensics, does not live on a personal device. It lives in the infrastructure the contractor used, in the patterns his financial behavior left in records he did not control, and in 19 hours of flash memory forensics that found the fragments the factory reset could not reach. The approach corridor that 3 FA-18 pilots flew into 3 nights in a row, each night adjusted, and each adjustment anticipated, was not a corridor that became dangerous because Iranian air defense is capable. It became dangerous because the parameters that determined where the aircraft would be at 1:47 a.m. were known to the air defense system 7 hours in advance, transmitted through a health monitoring packet that everyone ignored, because health monitoring packets are always there, and nobody reads them. The pattern that revealed the compromise was visible after 3 nights. It required 3 nights because 1 night's threat activation is an anomaly, and 2 nights is a possible coincidence, and 3 nights is a pattern. The electronic warfare officer who compiled the 3 nights logs and submitted his pattern analysis at 3:10 a.m. was reading that language correctly. He was reading it on the 3rd night. The investigation that followed wished he had been reading it on the 1st. The communications architecture corrective that followed wished it was not possible for the 1st night to have happened at all. Both wishes are documented. Neither changes what happened. The record carries both. What was done correctly, in the time available, with the information that existed, and what the information was not able to say until after 3 aircraft had broken away from an air defense battery that knew they were coming before they did. The most consequential intelligence in a secure network is not always the classified traffic. It is the administrative traffic, the packet streams that exist to confirm the network is healthy rather than to carry its mission content. Every security architecture is built around a threat model. The threat model defines what the adversary wants from the network and how the adversary might try to reach it. The JSCC's threat model assumed that the adversary wanted mission content, approach corridor parameters, strike timing, target coordinates. The JSCC's security architecture was designed around that assumption. The health monitoring software was not in the threat model, because health monitoring software carries diagnostic data, not mission data, and the threat model did not include a scenario where diagnostic data fields could be used as a covert exfiltration channel for encoded mission data that the monitoring software was modified to extract. The threat model was correct about what the adversary wanted. It was incomplete about how the adversary might reach it.